The Dance at Maple Grove. The fall of 1954 was a magical time in the small town of Maple Grove. The trees turned brilliant shades of red and gold, and the air was crisp with the promise of winter. But for the students of Maple Grove High School, the highlight of the season was the annual homecoming dance, a night of music, laughter, and youthful romance. For 17-year-old Margaret Thompson, the dance was both a dream and a nightmare. She was a shy girl with soft brown eyes and a quiet demeanor. While her classmates buzzed with excitement, Margaret felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. She had never been to a dance before, and the thought of stepping onto the floor filled her with dread. But this year was different. Margaret had been asked to the dance by James Carter, the most popular boy in school. James was the star quarterback, with a winning smile and a charm that made every girl's heart flutter. Margaret couldn't believe he had chosen her. She spent weeks preparing, sewing a pale pink dress and practicing her dance steps in front of the mirror. On the night of the dance, Margaret stood in front of her bedroom mirror, smoothing the skirt of her dress and pinning back her hair. Her reflection looked back at her, a mix of nerves and excitement. She knew this was her chance to step out of the shadows, to be someone other than the quiet girl who spent her days in the library. When James arrived to pick her up, Margaret's heart skipped a beat. He looked dashing in his tailored suit, his dark hair neatly combed. He took her hand and led her to the car, his touch warm and reassuring. "You look beautiful," he said, and Margaret felt a blush creep up her cheeks. The gymnasium was transformed into a wonderland. Streamers hung from the ceiling, and the faint scent of punch and homemade cookies filled the air. The band played lively tunes, and the dance floor was packed with couples swaying to the music. James was the perfect gentleman, making Margaret laugh and guiding her through the steps. For the first time in her life, she felt like she belonged. But as the night wore on, something changed. James seemed distracted, his eyes constantly scanning the room. Margaret tried to ignore it, focusing instead on the music and the joy of the moment. But then she saw her, Emily Reynolds, the most beautiful girl in school. Emily stood by the punch bowl, her golden curls catching the light. James's eyes lingered on her, and Margaret felt a pang of jealousy. She knew she couldn't compete with Emily. Emily was everything Margaret wasn't: confident, outgoing, and effortlessly charming. Margaret had always admired her from afar, but now she felt a sting of insecurity. She tried to push the thoughts away, but they lingered like a dark cloud. When the band played the final song, James turned to Margaret with a sad smile. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "You're a great girl, but—" Margaret didn't need him to finish. She knew what he was going to say. Her heart sunk, and she felt a tear slide down her cheek, but she held her head high, reminding herself that she had come to the dance as herself, and she would leave the same way. "It's okay," she said, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "Thank you for the dance." James looked surprised, as if he had expected her to cry or argue, but Margaret simply turned and walked away, her chin held high. She didn't look back as she left the gymnasium, the music fading behind her. The afternoon air was cool, but Margaret felt a warmth in her heart. She had danced under the glittering lights of the Maple Grove Gymnasium, and for a moment she had been the girl of her dreams. It didn't matter that James had chosen someone else. What mattered was that she had taken a chance, stepped out of her comfort zone, and discovered a strength she didn't know she had. As Margaret walked home, she thought about the future. She didn't know what it held, but she knew one thing for sure: she wouldn't let anyone make her feel small again. She had come to the dance as Margaret Thompson, and she would face the world the same way. Quiet, kind, and unapologetically herself. Years later, when Margaret looked back on that night, she smiled. The dance at Maple Grove had been a turning point in her life, a moment that taught her the value of self-respect and the importance of staying true to who she was. And though she never forgot James or the sting of rejection, she realized it wasn't him she needed to impress. It was herself.